Hi everyone, it's Jenny of Jenny Stitching Simply on Flosstube and on Instagram. I have Kitty here with me. She's barking, so I'm holding her. I wanted to try to make a Flosstube extra video today about how I downsized from my sewing room to the tiny space that I have now for my sewing and stitching. I do not have room in here with me today, so he is either going to be super proud of me for doing this by myself, because he keeps telling me that I'm going to have to learn how to do it someday, or very betrayed that I did this without him, but I think we're okay. I feel that I need to explain kind of the backstory for the change in the setup. Kitty's growling at me. So when we moved into our house, probably almost 9 years ago, upstairs, one of the bedrooms was my sewing room, and the bedroom next to it was my husband's office. And it was everything I had ever dreamed of. I had always wanted a sewing room. And we live in a very typical 1970s split level. So downstairs, at one point, the previous owners had converted the garage into an in-laws quarters. So the boys were both downstairs in that little kind of apartment setup. And then last February, my dad moved in with us. And so he took the in-laws quarters and we moved the boys upstairs into the two bedrooms that were the office and the sewing room. So it was actually a good kind of practice. We've been downsizing, as I had mentioned in earlier videos, with the goal of moving to a very tiny house when Roman graduates from high school in 2024. But this gave us a chance to see, like, how much we could really part with and find creative ways to store things. So when I had my sewing room, there were days I would sit there and think, I could never live without this. This is everything I always wanted. And without taking you into the room, because it's Roman's bedroom now, it's a typical, it's bedroom size, regular closet. None of our rooms have walk-in closets or anything like that. And I thought I would give you kind of a rundown of what was in there. So I had at one point 2 full bookcases. I love books. I went to art school, so I had lots of reference books. There was a kind of a low table that had things on the surface of the table, and then also there was a shelf underneath that you could put things. And then there was a massive china cabinet that was probably from the late 80s, early 90s, that a friend of ours was getting rid of. And I thought, oh my gosh, this would be perfect. I could put all my fabric in there and you could see it all lined up behind the glass. And then there were drawers and there were cabinets, and it took up like an entire wall. And then I had a desk for my sewing machine. Then I had a desk for my jewelry making. And then behind that desk was a table with drawers that I used as my soldering table. So I could just swivel around in my chair and go back and forth. And then, of course, like an ironing board. And the closet was just completely full. I put IKEA shelves on either like the left and right side of the closet, and then in the part where you would hang clothes, it was just stacked with totes full of things. And then the top shelf just had multiple like stacking plastic boxes that you would get at like Target filled with things. So over the years, of course, I had a sewing room, so things just kept getting added to the sewing room, and people would give me things, and then there were certain points where it was just like a dumping ground for things. And as the years passed, I think I found myself doing less actual sewing and just anything, and spent more time, like how can I reorganize this. And at one point, my sister-in-law, who was living in Texas, my brother was in medical school in Texas, and they were like really into the Annie Sloan chalk paints before we had really heard of it out here. And so she had helped me paint the china cabinet with a Paris gray Annie Sloan chalk paint. And then, I ended up painting all the furniture that color, and it was kind of, I don't know, I felt like I spent more time like redecorating and reorganizing the room than I did working in it. So when my dad moved in and we had to rearrange things, I really had to start making some decisions about the stuff that was in the room. And I also noticed that over the years, it was almost like, besides the overwhelming urge to organize, there was sometimes a sense of shame of things that like I had started and didn't finish, and like just knew that I was never going to finish. And I hadn't heard of Flosstube, and like that it's okay. It's totally okay to just be fine admitting that you're not going to finish something and move on. And so there was just years and years of things like that in there. And like I had mentioned in my first Flosstube, I did used to stitch quite a bit, but it was mostly dimensions kits and things like that. So, I had all that in there as well. So I started thinking about like what projects I actually did and what supplies I actually used. And the jewelry making supplies, I definitely needed to rehome. That's what I did for work. So, that obviously had to be solved, which I, found something that worked really well, takes up very little space, is not really relevant to this video, but if anybody has questions about it, I'm more than happy to talk about it. But as far as like the sewing supplies and the stitching supplies, I asked myself, like, what do I really sew? And what I really sew are projects that are specific to a certain need, like a lot of home items like curtains and throw pillows, and I would buy fabric, and of course I wouldn't get rid of the extra, but it was like for curtains, and I never did anything with it, or like a baby quilt, for a specific person with a specific color scheme for the nursery. I have made quilts before. They were always gifts. I would love to do more quilting, but I think it's not the right season for that right now. I think maybe in the future, but that could change. And a lot of projects that were specific to things that my family needed. For example, my younger son Roman needed a pouch made for his bike for races that held specific things and fit in a certain spot on his bike. So like, I had to buy the materials for that project, but that's the type of sewing that I tend to do. It's very project specific, and it typically has to be done by a certain date. So most of the fabric I had, I realized, obviously there's exceptions. There's things I had bought along the way just because it was pretty, but I didn't use it. And most of it, once the project was done, I wasn't going to use it. I realized I got to the point where most of the things in the room were not really inspiring to me. They didn't make me feel like I wanted to work on things. So I had this overflowing room full of stuff, and of course we had all kinds of art supplies and paint. And at one point my mom had an art school. So like things that she didn't need anymore got passed on to us. And anyway, there's just lots of stuff, like everybody has, like just lots of stuff. So if you have a sewing room, that's awesome. And this probably won't apply maybe to many people, but I wanted to show you what I came up with in case you don't have a sewing room and you want to maybe find different ways of organizing. I ended up donating most of the things that were in that room. We have a really good thrift store that's close to us that if you bring in donations, I mean, you can go in 2 days later and they have everything out and beautifully merchandised. And I figured someone else would probably find use for the things that I, at a certain point, I have to admit that if I haven't used them in 9 years, there's probably not a chance that I'm going to. And I know that's not true for everyone, but for me, that's how it is. I found, Tristan was a senior at the time, my older son, so he had friends that were into jewelry making and things like that. So if there were anything that I knew I wasn't going to use, I was able to pass on to them. So basically there was a lot of purging, and in the past I had done it, but really not very aggressively. And this was like, all right, make a decision, let it go. Nothing in this room. It's just stuff. My mom would always say, you can't take it with you. So, I picked the things that were still, were inspiring to me and made me happy, and then figured out a way to store those in a way that I could find things and work on projects easily. So, I hope that background story helps, and I will start another section of the video and show you where everything is set up now and what I use to organize. So Kitty's still sitting here chewing on my necklace. She has to wear her cone right now, but she's so cute. So thank you guys, and I will put the next video in and show you what I was able to come up with. Hi guys, we're back for part 2. So where did the sewing and cross stitch stuff go? It went in our dining room. That's a perfectly normal place to keep this, but it works. This is the table that I mentioned being in the sewing room, and I am going to walk up and show you things more closely and pull some things out. This is definitely the part of the video that I'm sure Roman will critique the most, me moving the camera all around and making everyone sick, but we're gonna do our best. So the first thing I did was the ironing board. The ironing board is older than Roman, and the only thing that was really wrong with it was the legs were just really not very stable anymore. So I ripped them off. I put them on top of the table. I do have the measurements for the table written down. I can do like a little wrap up at the end and give you those. And then I got a new cover from IKEA and put that on. Probably should have dusted and things and done the floor. There's Kitty, poor thing. Anyway, so some of the things I can show you, and from this perspective, and then other things I will pull out and put on the dining room table and show you better. So we'll start with this basket here. The lighting is very poor today. It's really, really windy and dark outside, and so I had to turn the actual lights on in the house. So this is my main kind of whip project basket, and what I like to do is have things out and super accessible, because I feel like anything that I have to root around for just makes me not pick it up. So these are the produce bags that I use. So I have 2 projects in here. I have floss in this bag that I made from the Celeste Creates tutorial. Those are my flosses for the new Hands Across the Sea sampler that I'm going to be starting. And then what I like to do is keep the cover sheets. Usually I just print out the cover sheet of things that I'm working on cardstock, and I keep them in here, and then I kind of know, oops, sorry, that was an actual chart there. And then I have a few patterns that I would want to make a working copy. And then I keep my bullet journal, which is what I use for a planner, which also includes stitching things. And then I have my As the Yo Flies project tracker books in here. And then these are the threads for the Modern Folk Embroidery hanky sow, just all together in there. So this is kind of like my reminder basket of what I'm working on. So I don't keep all the parts together, which I know is different and probably seems like it's extra work, but for me, this method works best, and it takes up less space, and I can explain more about that in a minute. So then I have my tray, my orts, there's needle minder, my scissors, sometimes I use Thread Magic on silks, and then I did get a little pin cushion, and then I have my hand lotion that I like. So what I do when I stitch, so these are my threads for the Modern Folk Embroidery stitch along. Ooh, it's hard to put back on. So when I stitch on something, I grab this tray and I have all my threads on it. And then I grab the chart and the pattern, or the chart and the fabric. And I only print the page that I'm working on. And when I'm done with that page, what I find really satisfying, the way Brenda likes to start with a new needle each project, when I'm done with the page, I tear it up and throw it in the trash. And that's what's so super satisfying to me. So the reason I can do that is because I had mentioned, I think in my second video, I pretty much store all my charts on a thumb drive. And with the exception of, I did purchase my first 2 Blackbird design charts, which I will make a working copy of, and then they're, an actual chart that I need to keep. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I have a few more that I got for Stitch Mania that are paper charts, but this is probably the biggest space saver that I have, is the fact that I don't have paper charts to store. So then I have my sewing box that I love. It's from a company on Etsy. I'll put the link in. My boys were like, oh, is that a picnic basket? It does look like that. I'll try to open it here. But so what I usually do with this is, it's usually a grouping of projects. Like the last couple months, it was everything that I was working on that had silks in it, and I had my silks in there and my projects. And then right now, this is the 2 Blackbird design projects that I'm going to be working on. And so, like I was saying, what I would do is grab these, and I did buy a few overdyed, which I don't usually use, but I figured when I was doing the Blackbird, the bigger piece, I wanted to try. So I would take this, and I would take my tray, or sometimes even like the lid of this box works, and just take that to the dining room table where I stitch, and that's it. And then when I'm done, I put it back. So again, I mean, maybe this seems like more work. I'm not sure. For me, it feels like less work, and I don't really like kitting things up. So I just throw it in the thing, and I'm ready to go. So that's the top. And now the bottom, I'll show you, but then I'm sure I'll have to pull it out. So in this basket, this was from, this one and this one was from the thrift shop. When my husband was in physical therapy for 3 months and I would have to drive him, I would always have time to wait. And so I would go to the thrift shop. And this, I think I paid like under $20 for. I was super excited about. And that holds the paper, some other paper charts that I have, and I think maybe 4 projects that are kitted up and ready to start in May. And then, so I have my scissors and my rotary cutter, my orts, my buttons, and my pins. These are ceramic mugs that I love, and I realized they're just always in our kitchen cabinet, and I typically use 1 of 2 mugs every day, so it was nicer to have them out where I could look at. Behind that is the piece that Roman made me for my birthday that is holding all the threads for the Kathy Barrick painted wings chart. So same thing, I grab the fabric, and then I grab that, and then I just start stitching. And in the basket underneath are smaller cuts of linen. And then I have my DMC. And in that basket, which was also from the thrift store, is my duplicate colors and then my skeins of floss for the big projects that require, like the Modern Folk Embroidery, Fruits of Plenty, where I have like a dozen of each color. And then my sewing machine, what I did was I bought a cover, and in the cover, it surprisingly fits. Like I bought one that had storage, so there's pockets in the front, and then all along the sides here, there's pockets. So in there I have, like, I don't know, zippers. I don't keep like a ton of zippers on hand. I have a few, different sizes, different neutral colors, fray check, threads, obviously, again, pretty neutral colors because I usually buy things for specific projects, needles for the machine, I don't know, bobbins, like anything else you would need to sew. But I just kind of smushed it all into the pockets of this thing. And that this gray cover I found on Etsy too. So that's everything on the bottom. And then I keep my larger rolled up projects in this bag, which, yes, I put a command hook in our dining room to hold cross-stitch stuff. But my feeling is, if the people that come into our house don't understand how, much this means to me, like they're probably not really our friends anyway. So, or when we have small children over, I just take the stuff and put it in one of the kids' rooms just so that it's out of sight. But I will stop now and I will pull some of the pieces from the bottom out to show you. Hi guys. Okay, we're back and we have the big container pulled out on the dining room table. So what lives in here, again, I apologize for the light, are charts that are kitted up. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 fully kitted charts that have patterns, fabric, and flosses. And then I do have the Long Dog Pandemic printed because that was before it occurred to me that I didn't have to print out 30 pages. I could do it like one at a time. Whoops. And then I do have other charts that are physical charts as well. So I also keep, this is one large project bag that I use for both of my Modern Folk Embroidery stitch-alongs. Whoops, sorry about that. Okay, so that's what I mean by the, just like a little peek at it. When it's all crumpled up and highlighted like that, that's what I get satisfaction out of tearing up when I'm done. So this holds all the threads and, not all of them, I'm sorry, like the one, some of them. And yeah, you can kind of, I won't These are things that I'm planning on starting for Mania. So that's everything in there. And then this is the little basket that was there. And this just has smaller cuts of fabric that are labeled. I don't keep a ton of fabric. I know that that's very questionable, but like I have a lot of Monaco. If it came down to it, I would cut up the bed sheets and stitch on them. I mean, there's plenty to work with here, and I do have a few more places that I store things that I will explain to you momentarily as well. Okay, so to wrap up, I did actually have, so Roman didn't know I was going to try to make this video by myself, but I did have him go through the house to make sure that everything was accounted for and that I did not have anything stashed anywhere, because Roman would be the first person to tell you. So I have the rest of my supplies here to show you now. So I did bring my notes. That table that I showed you is 17 inches wide by 52 inches long by 27 inches high. So that's kind of the space that went, you know, from the sewing room to that kind of footprint is where we went. Things that you might be wondering that I didn't mention that I must have somewhere, and yes, you're right. My RIT dye, I don't have a ton of, but I do have some, and I keep that under the kitchen sink because that's where I do the dyeing. So I have a Pyrex container that has the RIT dye in it, and then a glass milk bottle that I use to mix the dye, and that's always just under the kitchen sink. Our iron is just in the closet with things like that where it would normally live. Just looking to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Oh, my cutting mats and my ruler, that is in our like hall closet where we keep our coats and things like that. And then the things that are not out in the dining room are with me here. I will show you. Tristan is kind enough to let me keep these in his closet. Neither of my boys really use all the room in their bedrooms. Their stuff primarily is like biking related and like camping related, so their bedrooms are pretty neat and tidy, and they usually have extra space. So Tristan is kind enough to let me keep things in his room. So the things that I have in Tristan's room are the following. I have to grab them. Okay, so I tried, guys. I did. I put my floss on thread drops, and it's funny because Bonnie had just said that she picked these up and she really liked these, and these are the ones that I had found at Joann when I had first started getting back into cross stitch too. And I cut them all the same length and made them pretty. But you can see, I mean, I love this and it makes it super easy, but I have no place to put something that takes up this much room. So what I have found is, instead of doing this, if I am very careful, I mean, not like, it doesn't take a ridiculous amount of time, but you know, I'm just aware of the fact that I'm pulling from the number side on the skein of DMC, that I can neatly pull it out and I don't have to actually cut them ahead of time, which I also found helpful in the sense that, you know, if you have like a repeating motif and you know that it uses a certain length, I don't really need the thread bed boards necessarily, because I don't end up with like a lot. I end up with like orts, and I usually am pretty conservative with my thread, but I don't end up with like lots of things that I have to wind up and then set down. Now, full disclosure, absolutely, like, did I purchase project bags and thread beds and, you know, all these things when I found Flosstube? Of course I did. You know, of course I bought linen that I probably won't use and things like that. And I stash unloaded them because I realized very quickly that it just wasn't, like, on that area that I showed you, that none of those things were conducive to the space that I had. So when people will say, like, oh, you have so much self-control, it's not really that. It's like I have a space limit, and to me, what I have fit in that space, I mean, I would estimate I could stitch for at least a year before I ran out of things to work on. So for me, it's a space issue. And if I start putting things like all over our house, I'm not even going to remember that I have them anyway. So let me just grab what I have in Tristan's room and I'll show you. It's really heavy. This is my basket of fabric. So I do have fabric. I mean, I know this is like not really that much fabric, but it's in this pretty basket that I love. And most of it is actually neutrals. It's like linens, not stitching linens, but like just neutral linens, the batting, for putting under projects when I finish them. I had gotten too much white felt for a gift that I had to make, and so the white felt that came by the yard actually worked really well for putting like between the board and the stitching also. So that's in Tristan's room. And then the other thing, I do have, but this is not from cross stitching, I do have bobbinated thread, but it's because my nieces and nephew came to visit. I think this was like 2 summers ago now, and I taught them how to make friendship bracelets, and we were obsessed with it, all of us. So I'm trying to use up like this. So this was actually all from friendship bracelets, and then after they left, we would make friendship bracelets at lacrosse. It was hilarious. Like all the boys would be making friendship bracelets, but so I'm trying to like use this up because I don't really need this in there. And then, hold on, sorry. I do have a big box. This box is also in Tristan's room. So the basket and this box, and in here I have large cuts of fabric. I have my finishing items, which again, I tend to wait until I know what I want to finish something with before I purchase the finishing items. And then I have sticky board. I have some sticky board, and I have 3 projects that are actually gifts, so they're not out for people to see. So, and then I have another one of these little baskets I found at the thrift store that have like my threads that are not orts, or like the ones that Kitty gets and then chews up, and I have to put them somewhere. So that's really it. I hope that maybe helps someone that does have a small space to work with. Again, I know it's different. I don't have everything all together, each in their own individual project bag, but this way has worked really well for me. But I am also working at my dining room table, which is right next to that table that I showed you where I keep my supplies. So it's a very short distance to travel with everything. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions or comments or things I forgot, I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I hope that helps. And thank you everyone again for all the support, and we will do a regular Flosstube video soon. I just really felt compelled to at least show you, it's not that I don't have things and that I don't buy things. That's the space I have to work with. So thank you everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.